Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining with us during this lunchtime session for Biotech Connections Singapore event on Biotech in Singapore, journey of 3 scientists here with us. Today we have Dr. Si Hui, Dr. Lu-En, and Dr. Yin Loon with us, sharing their journey transiting from academia to biotech venture. So this is actually a collaborative event between Biotech Connections Singapore and EVX. So EVX is actually a global biotech venture that builds, incubates, and invests in the biotech companies. With offices across Boston, Singapore, and Beijing, EVX leverages their global network to build cross-border ecosystem, nurture promising early-stage biotech startups, and creating lasting and meaningful impacts to patients. Right, without further ado, do allow me to have the opportunity to introduce the 2 finalists. Here with us, we have Dr. Tan Si Hui, Director of Biology at CarGene Therapeutics. Dr. Tan recently joined CarGene Therapeutics as Associate Director of Biology, where she manages matters big and small, scientific and otherwise. She received a PhD at Stanford University, where she was trained as a cancer and stem cell biologist. In 2020, she actually received a prestigious award of Young Scientist Award from A-Star. And besides her scientific pursuit, Dr. Tan believes in talent development and through robust and mentorship collaborations. So without further ado, I will actually pass the mic to Dr. Tan for her to have a self-introduction. Dr. Tan, please.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, BCS and EVX for the invitation. So hi, I'm Si Hui. I am, as Rachel mentioned, the Associate Director of Biology at CarGene Therapeutics. So sharing my journey with you to start, as you will find out as we discuss, my character is one that I really like to try to see whether something fits me and whether I like it or not. So since young in school, I've been dabbling in various internships and attachments, and this also included research labs. And eventually, I think bio really spoke to me, and that was where I decided to focus. For my undergrad, I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison to study biochem, and then I did my PhD in cancer biology at Stanford. So with a slight twist, my thesis lab was actually in signaling pathways, stem cells, and development. So there I looked at Wnt signaling in the development of bone endothymers, and along with other collaborations that laid a pretty broad scientific foundation for me, and also sort of laid the groundwork for doing more in vivo genetics. So I continued in that theme, and when I came back to Singapore, I did my postdoc at the then Institute of Medical Biology under Nick Barker. And my project there was looking at gastric stem cells and their role in gastric cancer. So other than a really strong scientific development there, I also gained very important soft skills because I was given the opportunity to do so. So I was able to work with and lead small teams where I strategized the scientific research direction. And I also helped with the daily execution of experiments, obviously. But besides that, the very valuable part was how I could learn to reach out for collaborations, write grants, write manuscripts, etc. So these soft skills are actually, they stay with you for the rest of your career. And I was very glad that I picked them up. So to be a good scientist, whether in academia or industry, I think there are 2 sets of skills. So one is the scientific part, and the other is all these soft skills, and only then I think you can mature into a more all-rounded scientist, regardless of where you go. So a bit about CarGene that I joined. We actually only started this last November, so we're pretty young. What we do is we use a combination of what I call chemistry wizardry, because this is way beyond my high school chem knowledge. And we also use biology to create therapeutic siRNAs. We have only been around for 6 months, but we have a very strong and talented team, and we have been very happy with our progress so far. And in fact, just when we started in November, together with our scientific co-founder, Thorsten from GIS, we got a golden ticket. And therefore, we also won ourselves a space in Lab Central in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In addition to that, we are setting up a site in China. So although we started with less than 10 in November, which is already pretty big for a startup, we will have almost 20 employees by end of this year. And we have so we are showing great progress, and we are recruiting the talent we need to help us with our expansion. So in this company, my official role is the associate director, as we mentioned, but with my fellow associate directors, Bing Xia and Sisi, I will say the appropriate term is we literally 报告了, which means we take care of everything in a company, no matter how big and how small. If there's an issue, we take it upon ourselves to try and solve it. So in essence, our main responsibility is to really ensure that the company runs smoothly on a daily basis. We oversee experiments, we analyze results with the scientists and the research associates, and we also set the scientific strategy for the midterm and long term. So you can see literally why I say we take care of everything. And in fact, if recently when we're moving, we also help with sort of coordinating the moves and seeing what to pack and etc. So I think it's been really fun being able to do this. Our team at Kajin also thrives on collaboration and discussions. So in addition to all these sort of responsibilities, we also often have meetings and ad hoc discussions that can last very long. They do take up time, but it's essential for the company to run smoothly, and they are usually very intellectually stimulating as well. So with so as y'all would know, I transitioned from academia to biotech when Kajin started, and I would say that my experience has been very, very fun. But every biotech is different, and it depends on which stage you join the biotech. So I can only speak for my experience for the past 6 months at Kajin. And as mentioned, we literally started from scratch. So we had to build everything, right? Literally everything, and there was no structure. So the founding team was the one who built the structure, whatever the company has now. And we are actually still playing as we go along and tweaking whenever our team members give us feedback, like, hey, you set up this thing, but it's really not working. This is making life very hard for us. And okay, we'll try and tweak it, and we try and make work as smooth as we can for everybody. So why is the lack of structure important? Because I would say a lot of PhD students and postdocs come from research institutions like ASAF and the universities. These organizations are big, and they have been established for so long. So there are a lot of SOPs and things that you don't think about, like procurement, hiring, lab setup, buying consumables, equipment, all these. You have dedicated people for these. Whereas at our startup, we literally divvy up all these responsibilities and try and get people, our team members involved in all these. So this lack of structure could be may not suit everybody, but for us, we saw it as an opportunity and sort of the broad creative space we had to solve whatever problems we could with whatever means we can find. So this was actually exhilarating for me and Bing Xia and Sisi. I think we really enjoyed it, and I think this also fits in our character or my character, because I'm a bit of a busybody by nature. So I like to do all these like things to try and solve issues for people. But having said that, again, if anybody joins like a more mature startup, I think there will be a lot more structure, maybe not to the level of established organizations like A-Star and the universities, but definitely more than a startup that started from scratch. So the other thing that people may not anticipate is how rigorous the science is in the industry. We set up our essays from scratch. So because we use these essays very, very heavily in order to churn through a lot of hits, to generate hits, churn through them, and eventually get a candidate that we put into patients, we need to be very, very confident of the results every single time. And of course, we can't really waste time as well with sort of essays failing every now and then or regularly. This will cost us a lot of opportunity cost. So therefore, we really spend a lot of time on doing these essays, and it could take months and a lot of manpower to get it to a reliable stage, which was something, again, I never really appreciated until I had to get my hands dirty along with the team. Having said that, even though I just said that it takes a long time, but the pace is very, very fast. So we are troubleshooting, optimizing at a very, very quick rate. So I would say to get this done, it really requires excellent technical skill, scientific knowledge, and a good sense of your experiment and what you are looking at and what you want to get out of it, as well as time management. And this is a really tall order, but we try we try to get our team members to rise to the challenge, and so far they have exceeded expectations, so it's been really great. And other than that, it's a very team-based environment, and our culture is is one that's very open. So we work in teams and we go to the extent of editing one another's presentation slides. So there is a very little of me or I in our company, but it's really about the we. And I think this culture is great because it means that everyone in our team is very receptive to feedback and is always looking to improve. So I think this part may have taken a bit of a while for people to transition, because I think in academia we're very used to okay, this is my lab notebook. I write what I have, and then I just present. There's not as much movement back and forth. So every startup, I believe, will have a different culture, and everyone has to see how they fit with the culture, whether that culture fits with them. Yeah, so that's all from me.
Thank you, Dr. Tan, for your insights. And I definitely agree with the dual track capability between scientific and entrepreneurship, and also complemented with other soft skills, right? But I also like to invite a second speaker, Dr. Lu-En Wai. I believe that she also has many experiences in managing a team that actually tackles different tasks. So Dr. Lu-En actually had 15 years of experience in immunology research in the field of transplantation, cancer, and HBV immunotherapy pathogenesis. She obtained her PhD in immunology from Stanford University on the A-STAR scholarship. And upon returning to Singapore, she actually joined SIGN, investigating the role of immunology microenvironment in controlling tumor metastasis. In 2017, Dr. Wai joined Lion TCR, the Singapore biotech startup that co-founded by Dr. Bertoletti, focused on using T-cell receptor in the T-cell immunotherapy to treat viral infections and viral-related cancers. So as now the Director of Research and Development at Lion TCR, Dr. Wai oversees the discovery and development of the TCR library, company assays development, and development of the new pipeline products in collaboration with academic and industry partners. Besides her job, she is passionate about developing new technologies in immunotherapy and also treating of various diseases. So without further ado, let me invite Dr. Wai to share her experience.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Rachel, for the nice introduction. I'll probably go a bit more in detail into that, just so you get a better background of what I've gone through, transitioning from academia to biotech. So, like Rachel said, so I actually started my journey, going from undergrad and then PhD study. So my undergrad was done in Imperial College in biochemistry. And then I continued with a PhD in immunology at Stanford University. So these were under an A-STAR scholarship. And why I chose immunology at that time really was, as a easily swayed young person, Philip Yeo at that time had mentioned that, oh, immunology is going to be the next hot thing. So I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. So I went into that. But really, that I haven't regretted my decision. So really, immunology does touch into many areas, many disease areas. So that has really, helped in my career as well. So so I did my PhD in immunology at Stanford, and I focused on the immune and cell interactions in liver transplantation and cancer, particularly focusing on natural killer cells. So after my PhD, I returned back to Singapore, and I was a research fellow at SIGN, so Singapore Immunology Network in A-STAR, in Jean-Pierre Abastato's lab. So there I was investigating the role of the immune microenvironment in controlling tumor metastasis using a mouse model of metastatic melanoma. And then after a couple of years there, I joined Antonio Bertoletti's lab at Duke NUS, Emerging Infectious Disease Program, to study hepatitis B virus immunopathogenesis. And this was using a humanized mouse model, which was in collaboration with Chen Xingfeng's lab at IMCD. At A-STAR. So as you can see, my research focus in academia has been mainly revolving around immune cell interactions and mechanisms, also around the fields of solid organ transplantation, cancer, and viruses. So moving on to 2017, I had the opportunity to join Lion TCR because this was a company that was co-founded by my PI at that time, Antonio Bertoletti, while I was still a postdoc in his lab. So the opportunity came up. They were looking for people. I joined, and so that was great. It was a nice transition for me. But to tell you more about Lion TCR, so Lion TCR focuses on using T-cell therapy to treat viral infections and viral-related cancers. So in particular, we use T-cell receptors, also known as TCRs, to re-engineer and redirect the patient's own T-cells in order to treat these viral-related diseases, especially the ones that are predominant in Asia, like hepatitis B virus and Epstein-Barr virus. So this concept really builds on Antonio's work of 20, 30 years and his academic findings in the field of HBV T-cell responses. And so that's why our lead product is using HBV-specific TCRs to re-engineer the patient's T-cells for the treatment of HBV-related liver cancer and chronic HBV infection. So at the current stage, Lion TCR has, since 2017, Lion TCR has brought this product into the clinics, treating a small number of patients, both in Singapore and China. And so far, we've shown good safety profile and a very encouraging signs of efficacy. But of course, these studies are quite small with few number of patients. So at the current stage, Lion TCR is expanding this product into multi-center trials around the world while using our cell production facility in Singapore as a cell manufacturing base. So a bit more about maybe my role at Lion TCR, so what I do. I'm Director of Research and Development, and my job is to oversee the overall discovery and development of multiple things, including our TCR library, companion assays, as well as new products that are in our pipeline. And these are in collaboration with both academic and industry partners. So given that that's kind of like the overall job description, as kind of what Si Hui mentioned earlier, it really is quite a multifaceted role. So my day-to-day work really involves meetings with different colleagues and teams across the company. And this can go from anywhere from doing alignment and brainstorming type of meetings with business development or the clinical and regulatory teams, or to experiment planning and troubleshooting and data analysis. And that's with your research and development teams, your product development teams, quality and control teams. So a lot of teams do work together closely at our company. Of course, my main focus being the R&D team. We also have meetings with vendors, collaborators on the product pipeline projects. We also do meet with regulatory bodies, patent lawyers, etc. So kind of as a side point as well, I mentioned a lot of these different teams within Lion TCR, and we are a startup, so each team is not huge; they're all quite small. But we also do have a lot of PhD holders in many of these teams. So although my role currently, is a scientific director, but we do have a lot of people who do understand different facets of the science in the different areas. So from product development to clinical and regulatory teams as well. So that's been very helpful. And it's nice to be able to work with many different teams across the board to get alignment of where the company is going. Of course, besides all these meetings, I don't just sit in meetings. We also have a lot of the usual science stuff. So catching up with literature, checking out the industry news, making sure we know what new technologies are out there, data analysis, and also just emails in general. So maybe I just want to point out some significant differences from academia to biotech. I think one of the main differences is that you kind of, from academic standpoint, you're mainly going from one project or one or two projects, and then in a biotech, you could be having multiple projects, and not just projects but tasks. So for example, like what Si Hui mentioned, especially at an early startup, you really are bao ka liao, you do everything, which is true. So since I've also been through that. But of course, I think going on to a more mature startup, you still have a bit more of bao ka liao as well. But at the same time, as more teams start to form, you do get a bit of more of a bigger picture. Yeah, and in terms of, I think another difference is from academia to biotech is that the acquisition of knowledge and the general language of biotech operations. So this can be ranging from the actual scientific knowledge in your particular field. So for me, that's immunotherapy, cell therapy. These are different from what I was doing at the bench initially. To things like, your good clinical practices, what's inside that, regulatory requirements in different countries, patent law requirements, chemistry, manufacturing controls for manufacturing, quality control. So all these all have slightly different languages. And even though, those are not my direct topics, but in order to talk to my other teams, we do have to have a basic knowledge of all these different terms so that we can actually have a good discussion. So I think for me, those were the kind of like the two main differences moving from academia to biotech. And yeah, so I'll end here and I'll probably give some time to Yin Loon as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lu-En, and especially sharing us with some insights, on switching between languages, managing different tasks at a startup company. So let's switch some gears. So we have covered from an oncology startup to immunotherapy, and now to a company actually targeting at a very niche area on cardiomyopathy as well. So Dr. Yin Loon is actually a co-founder of Novocore, who actually completed his PhD in the lab of Tim Steens at Stanford University, working on the function and nanoscale organization of centroids and cellular proteins in collaborations of other scientists as well. So he completed his postdoc studies at A-Star, and currently, as a co-founder of Novocore, he worked closely with Brian Burke on other co-founders to organize their research findings into packages had recently attracted significant venture capital investments. He's currently involved in setting up a research operation at Novocore, which aims to develop new gene therapies for intractable genetic cardiomyopathies and other cardiac diseases. So without further ado, let me invite Dr. Lee to share his experience. Dr. Lee, please.
My name is Yin Loon. Thanks, Rachel, for the introduction. I'm one of the co-founders of Novocore. When I was growing up, I never intended to be a startup co-founder. I spent my PhD and a big part of my postdoc focusing on basic cell biology. As Rachel mentioned, I worked on centrosomes and cilia. These are microtubule-based structures as a PhD student. It was a time when I was in grad school, it's a time where super resolution microscopy techniques were on the rise. So I collaborated with one of the pioneers in that field, W. Murner, to really study my proteins of interest at the subcellular level, how they're organized. When I came back to Singapore, I wanted to do more cell biology. And I was particularly interested, as I mentioned, in the microtubule cytoskeleton. But I wanted to switch to a more kind of in vivo, a more developmental context. And even at that time, maybe with an eye on perhaps a more kind of practical applications and a more practical job. So I joined Brian Burke's lab, but my research has been to understand how microtubules move the nucleus around during development, with a focus particularly on skeletal and cardiac muscle cells. And so, everything I described to you is all pretty basic cell biology. How do proteins move around? How do they do stuff? How do they get to places where they need to go? How does this all connect to a startup company? And the way I think about it is like this. So a lot of the genes that I worked on as a postdoc and a grad student are actually mutated in rare diseases. So for example, SEP290, centrosomal protein of 290 kilodaltons, something that one of my PhD lab mates studied. This is actually the first target for an in vivo CRISPR clinical trial sponsored by Editas. And in the case of Novocore, we are also pursuing a rare disease target. This comes out of the work of Colin Stewart and Brian Burke at A-Star. So Brian's my postdoc advisor. And I would really need to emphasize here that a lot of the work that gave us, most of the work that gave us the technology which enables us to start a company is not my work in the lab, right? This is work that comes out of Brian and Colin's labs, the collective efforts of many lab members over the years, as well as many collaborators that have worked closely with Colin and Brian. So the lead indication for Novocore is dilated cardiomyopathy caused by mutations in lamin AC. Many of you may have used lamin AC as a loading control in your Western blots, but when mutated, it results in pretty serious disease. So the DCM, or dilated cardiomyopathy caused by lamin mutations, is characterized by enlargement of the left ventricle of the heart, loss of contractile capacity. Eventually, it leads to heart failure. the standard of care, you only treat symptoms. The only real cure is actually a heart transplant. So this is a rare disease, but I think it's actually in this sweet spot where the disease is rare enough that you benefit from orphan drug legislation. So in the EU and the US, there's a lot of laws that kind of help drug companies move treatments for rare diseases forward. But in the case of lamin, it's common enough that the patient pool is actually not too small. In fact, mutations in lamin AC are the second most frequent cause of genetic DCM. And so how Nuivocol is going to treat this disease is by using gene therapy, using adeno-associated virus vectors to deliver a genetic cargo to the heart cells that modulates the disease states. And the mechanism by which this occurs, we believe, has to do with mechanical or cell biological interactions between the cytoskeleton and the nucleus. And I think this is where my background in basic cell biology converges with biotech and development of novel therapeutics. We are a cardiac gene therapy company. So beyond lamin A, we intend to pursue additional targets to identify treatments for other forms of genetically defined cardiomyopathies. And we will put in place what I think is a pretty novel target discovery platform. And this is sort of biotech language for how to find new stuff. We are a new company. We recently closed our financing round, first financing round. And actually, we haven't even started operations. So I'm actually still in A-Star. I will obviously transition to the company soon. But so I actually cannot speak to what it's like to work in the biotech because I've actually never worked in the biotech. So I would refer you to my fellow panelists for more details on that. But what I can address, and maybe to give you a different perspective on the world of biotech, is the financing part, the fundraising part. So as a co-founder, I was involved very closely with fundraising. I think I'm very lucky that Brian and Colin, my PIs, really kind of, I think, trusted me with basically their life's work. And so I worked very closely with Tan Yen Chong at EVX Ventures. We put together a package that was attractive to our investors. And obviously the goal here is you need to get enough funds to move your technology forward so that ultimately you can benefit patients. And it's really, you're sort of in the business of saving lives, right? So as a co-founder, what I was involved with was putting together a pitch deck, which we presented to our potential investors. And we had to pull data from our scientific co-founders' labs so that our investors can do due diligence. We, in addition to telling the investors what has been done in the academic lab, we also have to tell them what we want the company to do going forward. If it's funded, how do we take the findings in the academic setting and move it into the clinic? What experiments do we need to do to get it over the gap between what happens in the basic science lab and what you need to be allowed to initiate clinical trials? We also need to tell them things like, how are they going to make money out of this? Because ultimately it is, unfortunately or fortunately, a profit-driven business. So there needs to be a way where returns on investments are possible for the investors. One of the goals, I think, of the webinar is to demystify biotech. So I think I've sort of highlighted some of the similarities between academia and biotech. And I would say that you can think of fundraising as quite similar to getting you an academic grant reviewed, except your reviewers are not anonymous. And as one of the panelists alluded to before, there's a lot more going back and forth. Because you meet them and you present something and they come back to you with questions, you go back and you can really go back and forth like multiple times, especially if they're interested in you possibly investing in your company. So I'd like to end off by saying that I'm glad we could get Nuivocol off the ground. I'm looking forward to moving into the company so we can actually start doing experiments and move the product into the clinic. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Yin Loon, for valuable experiences and sharing with us your trials on getting the funds. So basically, now we'll move to the Q&A session. We'll be inviting all three panelists to address the questions from the audiences that we have received so far. So the first question actually is to all of you actually to tell us what are the top 3 factors that actually drives your decisions to move to biotech. It can be from your personal experiences, anything that have motivated you. It can be a what, especially for the case of Si Hui. So maybe I'll start from Dr. Tan to elaborate more on this.
Okay. Yeah, so why did I choose to move from biotech, from academia into biotech? So personally, as I've mentioned earlier, I'm somebody who likes to try new things, new experiences, because I feel that that is the best way for me to get the information I need in order to make decisions. And I don't really like to think of ifs and maybes because there are too many of them. So I wanted to find a new environment where I could challenge myself and see if it would fit me in the long run. And the timing was actually quite good because I felt that I had delivered my postdoc project. I brought it to a stage where transition will actually be less disruptive. So this was the personal part. And then externally, I was actually very excited at the biotech industry, especially locally, because the past few years it's been growing, and since COVID has started, it has really accelerated this development, and I could feel the energy in the space, and I was quite keen to move into that, to be part of this be part of this growth for this local industry. And also I was quite swayed by this opportunity because the proposed founding team, within the proposed founding team, there were already quite a few people whom I already knew, and I was really excited to work with them as well. So I would say for me, it was a lot of factors really aligned at the right time, at the right place, the right people, and that was why I made the move.
And there's a follow-up questions for you actually. So the audience that I would like to know, do you actually recommend fresh graduates to pursue a career in PhD or R&D and get some industry experience first, or immediately trying to further their studies? So what's your take on this?
I think you have to look at what kind of skill sets you want to build and what is your motivation for doing that. So I can imagine a fresh PhD grad, if you move straight into industry, you would understand the environment, the ecosystem a lot faster, and you understand what biotech requires of you. But at the same time, if you move into an academic postdoc, you can actually allow those soft skills to grow and develop as well, and try and see which direction suits you better. So not to say that you can't do that in the industry, you do, but I think it takes on a slightly different slant because the priority would actually be doing the R&D as well, and these skills you sort of take up as you go along. So it really depends on a lot of personal circumstances. I don't really have a strong recommendation. I would say go along with your character and what you want out of your career eventually.
That's actually very good advice. So maybe Dr. Wai would like to share with us what are the 3 top factors that actually drive you through on this journey?
Yeah, so I guess my 3 top factors, maybe I'll just name 2. So my biggest motivating factor was really being able to move this product from the bench to bedside. So it's truly a bench to bedside type of transition here, where the technology was built in Antonio's lab. I did see, I wasn't personally involved in it, but I did see, other postdocs, PhD students working on it. And to have the chance to be able to bring that into a clinical setting, I think was very exciting for me. So definitely I wanted to be involved in that process. So that was a very pull factor for me to go into biotech. The other factor would be to have the opportunity to learn skills outside of academic research. I think in academic research, it's very easy to just focus on your project. You would just be learning mostly a lot of scientific skills. Not say that's not good. This is still good. But for myself, I think I wanted to learn some other skills as well, because I didn't really see myself becoming a professor or continuing in the academic scene. So I really wanted to learn these other skills, and have all these other new languages in that sense, which I mentioned earlier, to broaden my, to give myself more opportunities as well, I think, for a career development standpoint. So yeah, I think those were the two main factors that put me into biotech. At that time in 2017, that it was, I think Singapore kind of goes in phases a bit about, the number of biotechs. Definitely, I think the last couple of years has been uptrend. So that has been a good sign. When I joined, it was still pretty new. The most recent wave was still pretty new, but I thought, the timing was right, the opportunity was there. So that's why I did it. I also wanted to maybe mention a bit about that question earlier about whether you should go into R&D or academic as your first job. I think this person was mentioning it maybe more from undergrad, means graduating from undergrad. So I think in that case, yeah, I think part of it's personal preference. Part of it is also what do you foresee yourself doing more further down. Of course, at this point, you probably don't really know. That's why you want to try. I think the benefit of trying maybe going to a biotech as a fresh undergraduate graduate is that you do kind of see where the different careers are within a biotech, and then that might also help to shape whether you think you need further studies for that, or you might want to go into more technical fields, for example, manufacturing, quality control, which of course, and depending on the field you're in, having a further degree may help, having a further degree may not help. So it really depends on I think having that exposure early on would be helpful. So maybe internships or, even as a first job outside after undergraduate studies, that would be helpful. Of course, not saying that, academic jobs after your graduation is not a good choice. There's many factors.
Yeah, thank you very much for the advice. And I think it's really important to judge based on one's technical expertise and also future applications. So Dr. Yin Loon, would you like to share with us the top 3 factors that drive you to make this decision? And also one, because you shared with us, right, your mentor entrusted you with the research. So before making this transition, what other information sources actually do you reach to, or any resources in local community that helped you to make this decision?
Yeah, so I think for me, career-wise, what I wanted was to lead scientific teams. And I think I decided, along the way that I was happy to do this either in academia or in industry. Biotech, plus points are that if you do it right, things can be very well resourced and things can move very, very fast, whether you like it or not. That's also the bad part, because things move very fast. So there's no time to breathe. So I guess the disadvantage of biotech is unlike in academia, you can't really run off and chase some serendipitous finding, right? You have to focus on delivering what you promised your investors you would deliver. But having said that, I don't, at least in the time where I was sort of thinking about these things as a postdoc in A-Star, there were sort of, I think, increasing pressures to translate. And so maybe in that context, it made it a bit less difficult, because if I have to translate anyway, then there's not much difference between kind of government-funded institute like A-Star and biotech. But I don't think that's really the. So for me, I think I probably would be happy either way, as long as I was running something. As far as local kind of resources, I'm quite fortunate to know a couple of people in local venture. So Yan Chou, I mentioned Ho Si, who's at Lightstone, was one of the people I spoke with as well, to try to understand the biotech space. So in that sense, I was fortunate to know a couple of people who were on the funding side of biotech. In the case of Yan Chou, had actually started his own biotech. So some of those conversations helped me to better understand what the industry was like. But even if you don't know people personally, I think things like BCS. Actually, that was for me one of the big sources of information. For those of you who don't know, BCS has been running these kind of seminars for actually many years now. So I when I was a bit more free, I attended quite frequently, and it was I think BCS has done a great job of bringing in whatever speakers we have available in the local ecosystem to share and to demystify what biotech is like. So there's some of the sources of information.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. And the follow-up question for Dr. Tan, actually, because in your CV actually said that you are very interested in talent development through mentorship and collaboration. And then also the audience was just wondering, do you have any issues, hiring a talent in the local pool as well? And a follow-up, there's a question from themselves saying that, what are the top qualities that the candidates to biotech startups actually value? What makes a good CV? What type of certificates should they get, to actually land a job in a biotech venture like yours?
So I think hiring is always on the top of our mind. In Singapore, right? We always hear the government say human resources are only resource. I think that can't be any more true. So to look for candidates, we do more passive standard things like placing advertisements, but we also tap into our own personal network to try and look for candidates as well. So sometimes we may come across people who we think are very good, but they've never thought about joining a biotech. So we actually reach out to them to chat with them to understand, what are your personal goals and what a biotech is like from our perspective, and is there a good fit? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I keep mentioning this, but ultimately, a job is really about a fit. If you find the right fit, you'll be happy and you can stay for very long and be motivated. So this talent pool is quite small in Singapore. So we work quite hard to find talent. And with regards to certificates and courses and stuff like that, I think because the range of scientific topics in the biotech is so broad, there's not really a specific course or certificate you can get to ensure a job. So you have to look at every startup and look at the JD and what are they looking for. So your skill set has to match that part. So maybe Lu-En has more insight about the manufacturing aspect of it, but I'm not so sure about that. But I know that very clearly what we're looking for are people who have shown themselves to be good scientists and are motivated and are very smart and are team players. So for all these, there isn't really that one course you can take, whatever, except to do the best in whatever you're doing right now. Whether as a PhD student, an undergrad, a postdoc, deliver the best you can in your current job. And this itself will show when you're interviewing for your jobs in anywhere, including biotech. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, but I think that definitely covers a lot of information, especially doing right on the current job actually does good for future referees as well. So this question also channel back to Dr. Wai. Based on your R&D experience, do biotech companies place more emphasis on hiring people with experience in product development or in-depth research, basically a primary research as mechanic understanding of the field? Which one do you actually prefer?
Okay, I think my short answer to that, it really depends on what the company is hiring for. So for example, if we have a role open for more product development related tasks, then again, the relevant experience will come in. If we're hiring for someone in the more R&D, more of a scientific discovery and development type of role, then someone with a deeper understanding of mechanistic understanding of that particular field will be helpful. But again, like what Si Hui said, it really, we don't, it's not like a black and white. So as long as you've shown your own expertise within your field, hopefully it's close enough to whatever biotech you're applying to. I think that it really helps. So I think most importantly is the ability to show your independent ability to propose, plan, carry out, troubleshoot a particular project to a good level. The ability to work with collaborators on your project, with vendors, with other people to show this good teamwork, this team player type of skill. And I think those are the kind of the main factors that we really do look for in terms of hiring. So I mean, within our company, we have people who don't necessarily have the exact scientific expertise in, say, cell therapy or HBV, or I mean, it's a niche field, so we don't expect people to have the exact knowledge. Is quite not possible. So, but we do take people with similar type of skills, whether it's cancer biology, whether it's like molecular biology, cell signaling, who have demonstrated those kind of qualities. Yeah, and then maybe in terms of, although I think Si Hui said that maybe there are not so many, no one course that you can take to show off your skills. I think what was helpful for me was that before this whole journey of entering a biotech, which happened like 3-4 years before that, I was already taking courses in like Coursera just to understand like what is GCP, what does GCP mean? What is good clinical practice? So any of these kind of courses that might help you in a biotech, I think just to understand that language, GCP, patent law, innovation, this kind of thing. I think having shown that you've taken a course and also, putting your heart into the course, not just click and say go. Also does show to, biotechs that you are interested to learn more outside of your own field. And I think it also just helps yourself in general to understand what goes into a biotech as well.
Thank you, Lu-En. That's very insightful. I think.
Can I also add in another point? So I just wanted to say that on top of hard skills like your biology, chemistry, physics, whatever skills, we are also definitely looking for people with good learning attitudes, because we understand we just can't find like 100% fit, right? It's very, ideal candidate is very rare. But when we talk to people, we're also looking for people who have who are able to pick things up quickly and want to pick things up quickly. So a good learning attitude is actually very, very important for such challenges. Okay.
Maybe I want to add on to Si Hui's point about good learning attitude. So I think for me, I'm going to the point of when we actually do interview people, is to make sure that you do a bit of homework on the company you want to join, or even if not the company per se, the field in general, just so that just to show that you do have interest and you do have some foresight in thinking about what could be areas you're interested in, even within this field, not necessarily this biotech. But I think that goes to show a lot about yourself.
Yeah, great point. To summarize, is the flexibility, adaptability, and also drive to learn and to contribute. I think that's very critical. I think this question is actually directed to Yin Loon. So the audience is just wondering, for some of us or postdocs here may not have a PI or labs with technology that help us spin off to be part of. So where should they look for such budding kind of biotech startup opportunities to join? For advice.
Yeah, I sort of answered that online as well, but biotechs have to hire scientists. So actually Novacall is still advertising right now actually. I think as Lu-En sort of alluded to this, right? The biotech scene is nascent in Singapore, but I think right now it's actually rising. I think you're going to see more and more biotechs starting to get funded, and a lot of them are going to be not the virtual kind of startups where there's everything is outsourced. I think a lot of them are going to be startups which need to hire scientists, and so we advertise through the usual advertising channels. LinkedIn, I think, is very popular. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you should probably get one. Because if we operate in Singapore, we of course have to advertise through the mycareers.gov website. I think those are the two main channels we pushed out. In the case of Liverpool, we pushed out advertisements to A-Star and the universities. I don't know how. So I know in A-Star it gets sent out to everyone. The universities, I don't know where it gets circulated to. But I mean, we have to hire, right? And we're not gonna just kind of only depend on our personal networks. It'll be impossible to fill a team that way. So it's freely advertised. Anybody can apply.
Sure, thank you. I'm sure you're going to accept a lot of CVs after this talk, so be prepared.
Oh, I have one more to add. Sorry. So basically, I unfortunately in this current situation, it's very hard to go for things like BCS conferences, which Yin Loon. I'm happy to hear that Yin Loon used to go for them because I was one of the organizers. And not Apex and all these things. And I think those are very valuable conduits, because here you can meet people in biotech, understand from them what's life like, what are the challenges, and hey, are you guys hiring? Can I send my CV, or would I be a suitable candidate? So all these kind of informal chats and informal information gathering, networking would actually help a lot in trying to get into biotech. And I also wanted to say that biotechs don't just hire people for the R&D positions. There's a whole range of positions to feel like pattern law, as Lu-En mentioned, the business part, the operations part. So yeah, so we are looking for a broad set of skills by different candidates, not one candidate.
Yeah, that's great tips for our audience. Right, I think we're approaching to the end of the webinar. So I think we'll have one or two last questions for the panelists. So basically the audience would like to ask which field within the biotech in Singapore are right now venture capital is actually investing in, and also what's the next step of your company actually. So they would like to know about these two questions on your take. Maybe I'll start with Lu-En, please.
Okay, what areas are being invested more in Singapore within biotech? I think we've seen a lot of medtech companies. Any specific areas? I think immuno-oncology is still a big field. Neurodegenerative diseases, cardiovascular diseases. I think these are quite, as with aging population and all this, I think these are some of the big areas. But we also do need to think about it in terms of like a global scene. So Singapore is, not just biotech in Singapore, but we are competing with the world. So I think that's why I think it's important that we do work not in our silos as well, even within different companies, but to also have this network and help out each other. In terms of, I'm sorry, what was your second question?
What's the next step maybe of your company or development and everything? Right.
So I think I mentioned a bit about the next step of the company. So mainly we are trying to scale up and bring our product into multi-center trials. So this is an immense effort. All the teams are involved and to get everything aligned and to push it out. So and of course then we are getting more funds as well to support this effort of going into multi-center trials. And of course the next step was also to build on our product development pipeline. So although we do have a lead product, we do have other upcoming technologies that are still in the preclinical phase that we are driving through into more, to make sure that the work is done properly, and then how we're going to scale up those products and etc. bring into trials. So that's currently the stage of where Line TCR is.
Thank you, Dr. Wai. And maybe Dr. Tan, do you like to follow up on these questions as well?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with Lu-En that the immediate hottest areas is still immuno-oncology and cardiovascular cancer. And I would say COVID has made people realize how important infectious diseases are for us to keep an eye on it. So I think that's coming up as well. And even other than the usual sort of pharmaceuticals or therapeutics and delivery, I also see quite a bit of I guess like hand sanitizing. How do you keep your things clean, and all these new products to disinfect various things around our life, also starting to gain momentum. But again, at the basis of it, it's really the good science. I think people will also be surprised at how stringent VCs and investors are when they look at your science. So it's hard to have a good long run if your science is not solid. And as for CAR-G's next step, we're only 6 months old, so we are still in the preclinical phase, but of course we hope to work as a team and churn out our lead products soon. And operationally, we're trying to get our Boston and China site up and running. So I think it'll be a very exciting phase for us.
Thank you, Dr. Tan. So Dr. Lee, do you like to wrap up the session and share with us your take on this question?
Yes. Yeah, so I agree with the other panelists that I think the correct question is not what field within biotech Singapore is investing in. The question you should be asking is what is the global biotech VC community interested in investing in? And clearly all our companies are funded, have been funded. So these are obviously areas which have global VC interests. Obviously, I'm most familiar with what we work on. And so gene therapy, gene delivery systems are a hot area right now. And I would like to say that good science will get funded, but it is true that venture can be a bit of a trendy business. It's like academia, right? There's I don't know, single cell sequencing is all the rage right now in academia, which I don't understand why, but there's a bit of this stuff going on. But good science is absolutely important, even if you're in the right hot area and your science is bad. You're not gonna get funded, right? As we mentioned, VCs are very rigorous, right? They all have PhDs. I think a point that I often like to note is that no credible biotech or medtech VC funded Theranos, right? All the people who funded Theranos were these tech types who didn't really understand the hard science. So yeah, good science, yes, areas of importance, and you need to look globally. Because ultimately our markets for therapeutics are global. You cannot just have a company that treats only patients in Singapore. You'll never survive.
Maybe what's next for Novocore, just to, if can.
Yeah, we want to open our lab. Yes, and then we hope to move our lead product into IND and enabling studies in about maybe 18 months.
All right. Thank you so much for all the panelists. Thank you so much for your time and also sharing with us your valuable experiences and also valuable inputs for our audiences to learn, what are the inner workings of a startup and also how to transit from academia to such exciting and ever-changing landscape. So I do hope you enjoy this lunchtime session on the Biotech in Singapore, journey of 3 scientists in biotech. And again, a big thank you to Dr. Tan, Dr. Wai, and Dr. Lee for joining us for the session. And I do hope you enjoyed the session. We'll hope to post this video on our BCS YouTube channel soon. Thank you, and do stay tuned and have a good afternoon ahead. Thank you all. Bye. Have a good lunch.